Last episode, a silent killer arrived. Infected rats arrived on merchant ships. The horrific Black Death swept across the land. Millions of innocent people died in agony. Massive plague pits filled the silent cities. Entire farming villages were completely wiped out. But the surviving peasants gained immense power. They demanded higher wages and better treatment. The strict chains of feudalism finally cracked. Desperate lords passed cruel, oppressive new laws. The furious peasants marched directly on London. They burned tax records and executed corrupt officials. The medieval world was permanently flipped upside down. A new middle class of independent farmers emerged. But the wealthy nobles began to fight among themselves. We are doing a comprehensive series on the grand history of Britain, covering everything from mud villages to fractured kingdoms. New episodes will drop every single week. So make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update. By the middle of the 15th century, the English crown was in absolute, disastrous turmoil. The powerful Plantagenet dynasty had ruled the island with an iron fist for over 300 years. But the current king, Henry VI, was a deeply pious, incredibly weak, and highly ineffective ruler. He completely lacked the ruthless military mindset required to control the deeply ambitious English nobility. To make matters worse, Henry suffered from severe, completely incapacitating bouts of mental illness. During these dark periods, the king would fall into a silent trance and could not even recognize his own son. A massive power vacuum opened up at the very top of the medieval government structure. The king's fierce French wife, Margaret of Anjou, desperately tried to hold the crumbling kingdom together. But a powerful rival emerged from the shadows to challenge her authority and claim control of the government. Richard, the Duke of York, was the wealthiest noble in the land and a brilliant military commander. He strongly believed that he had a much better, more legitimate blood claim to the English throne. The English nobility violently split into two heavily armed, deeply bitter rival factions. The loyal supporters of King Henry wore the red badge of the Red Rose of Lancaster. The ambitious supporters of Richard wore the white rose of the House of York. This bitter, multi-decade family feud would become famously known as the devastating Wars of the Roses. In 1455, the cold political tension finally exploded into absolute, bloody violence. The Yorkist army intercepted the king's royal entourage in the narrow streets of St. Albans. Heavily armored knights violently hacked each other to pieces in the cramped alleys and market squares. The Duke of York captured the bewildered King Henry and seized total control of the government. But Queen Margaret absolutely refused to accept defeat and raised a massive new army in the north. She launched a brutal surprise attack against the Yorkists at the incredibly bloody Battle of Wakefield. The Duke of York was completely overwhelmed, pulled from his horse, and mercilessly slaughtered on the battlefield. Queen Margaret ordered his severed head to be placed on a spike above the heavy stone gates of York. She mockingly placed a cheap paper crown on his dead head to humiliate his royal ambitions. The House of York had lost its great leader, but his teenage son Edward was hungry for immediate revenge. Young Edward was a massive, towering warrior standing over 6 feet tall and famously charismatic. He gathered the surviving Yorkist forces and marched north to confront the Lancastrian army in a blinding snowstorm. The two massive armies clashed at the Battle of Towton, the largest and bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil. Over 50,000 heavily armored Englishmen fought for 10 grueling hours in the freezing, blinding snow. The combat was so incredibly savage that the local river literally ran thick with human blood for days. Edward completely crushed the Lancastrian forces and forced King Henry and Queen Margaret to flee into exile. The victorious young warrior marched into London and was officially crowned as King Edward IV. If you're enjoying this historical journey so far, please take a quick moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Edward relied heavily on the support of his incredibly wealthy and powerful cousin, the Earl of Warwick. Warwick was so incredibly influential that he became famously known throughout history as the legendary kingmaker. But the young king made a massive, unforgivable political mistake that deeply insulted his greatest ally. Instead of marrying a foreign princess to secure a powerful alliance, Edward secretly married a beautiful English widow. Warwick was completely humiliated and absolutely furious that his grand political plans had been completely ruined. The legendary kingmaker shockingly switched sides and forged a secret alliance with the exiled Queen Margaret. He successfully launched a massive rebellion and managed to temporarily overthrow King Edward. The frail, mentally broken Henry VI was dragged out of the Tower of London and placed back on the throne. Edward fled to the continent in pure panic, but he did not stay in hiding for very long. He returned to England with a new army of ruthless mercenaries and marched directly toward London. At the fog-covered Battle of Barnet, the great kingmaker was pulled from his horse and violently killed in the mud. A few weeks later, Edward caught Queen Margaret's remaining army at the bloody Battle of Tewkesbury. The Lancastrian forces were completely annihilated, and the young Lancastrian prince was brutally executed on the field. Queen Margaret was finally captured and locked away, her fierce spirit permanently and utterly broken. Shortly after this devastating Yorkist victory, the captive King Henry VI was quietly murdered in the Tower of London. The House of Lancaster was seemingly wiped off the map, and King Edward IV ruled securely for over a decade. The island enjoyed a brief period of economic prosperity, grand royal feasts, and relative political peace. But the fragile peace was completely shattered when King Edward died suddenly and unexpectedly of a mysterious illness. He left behind his young 12-year-old son to inherit the heavily disputed English throne. Before the young boy could be officially crowned, his ambitious uncle Richard seized total control of the capital. Richard claimed that the young prince and his little brother were actually illegitimate and therefore could not rule. He locked the two young boys securely inside the heavily guarded stone walls of the Tower of London. The two royal children simply vanished into the dark shadows and were absolutely never seen alive again. Historical rumors quickly spread that their cruel uncle had them quietly smothered in their beds while they slept. The ambitious uncle immediately claimed the empty throne for himself, becoming the infamous King Richard III. But his ruthless, bloody path to the crown made him deeply unpopular and highly suspicious among the surviving nobles. His reign was plagued by constant paranoia as former Yorkist allies began to secretly plot against him. Across the English Channel, a new, completely unexpected challenger was quietly gathering a rebel army. Henry Tudor was a relatively unknown exile with a very weak, distant blood claim to the Lancastrian line. However, the desperate enemies of Richard III flocked to Henry's banner in pure hatred of the new king. In 1485, Henry Tudor sailed across the sea and landed a small mercenary army on the Welsh coast. He marched inland, gathering dissatisfied English and Welsh rebels as he moved toward the center of the country. King Richard III intercepted the rebel army at the legendary, swampy battlefield of Bosworth Field. Richard had a much larger, better-equipped army, but many of his powerful nobles secretly hated him. When the brutal fighting began, several key English commanders absolutely refused to engage their troops. They stood completely still on the hills, waiting to see which side would win before committing their forces. Seeing his army crumbling, King Richard spotted Henry Tudor desperately hiding behind his royal bodyguards. Richard ordered a massive, incredibly brave cavalry charge directly at his political rival to end the war instantly. The fierce warrior king hacked his way deep into the enemy lines, coming within mere inches of killing Henry. But Richard was suddenly surrounded, pulled violently from his warhorse, and beaten to death in the muddy swamp. He was the very last English king to die violently on the battlefield, completely ending the long Plantagenet dynasty. His battered, bloody royal crown was supposedly found hanging on a simple thorn bush near his dead body. It was immediately placed on the head of the victorious rebel, officially crowning him as King Henry VII. To completely heal the deep, bloody wounds of the nation, Henry Tudor made a brilliant political move. He married Elizabeth of York, the eldest daughter of the former Yorkist King Edward IV. This strategic royal marriage finally united the two warring houses together after decades of absolute slaughter. He combined the Red Rose of Lancaster and the White Rose of York to create the famous Tudor Rose. The devastating War of the Cousins was finally over, but the new Tudor dynasty was just getting started. This new royal family would completely change the religious and cultural destiny of the entire world forever. Next week on our channel, the Tudor dynasty faces its most legendary and terrifying monarch. We will follow the massive, tyrannical reign of King Henry VIII as he desperately searches for a male heir. Get ready to see a king break an entire nation away from the powerful Catholic Church just to secure a great divorce. You will discover the tragic, bloody fates of his 6 famous wives and the terrifying power of absolute royal paranoia. If you enjoyed this animated journey through the Wars of the Roses, hit that like button right now to show your support. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, Stickman Chronicles, so you're first in line when the next episode drops. Thank you for watching, keep exploring the past, and we will see you right here next week for the ultimate showdown.